Hi, my name is T Ashok, and I'm going to take you through a quick introduction of Immersive Session Testing. What is Immersive Session Testing? It's a style of testing that exploits the logical left with creative right, enabling one to immerse deeply and test rapidly in short sessions. In IST, evaluation is done in three phases. Phase 1, called the reconnaissance or recon, phase 2, the exploration, and phase 3, the recoup, the rest and recover phase. In the reconnaissance phase, the objective really is to understand the big picture, whereas in the exploration phase, the objective is to scan for issues. In the last phase of recoup, it's really about analyzing outcomes and refining what we have, and 1, 2, 3 occur in a cycle. So let's look at the details of each of these phases. In the reconnaissance phase, the focus first is to construct a landscape of who are the users, what are the entities, what far are we testing, what are the expectations, and where we should be evaluated on, the environments of interest. After constructing a landscape, we kind of put together a map of the terrain. Who uses what is expected of each entity, the scope. How do each of these entities interact with each other? And finally, what are the various environments of interest? Now, an act of constructing the landscape and mapping a terrain helps us to understand the big picture, which is really reconnaissance. Moving on to exploration phase, where the objective is to scan for issues, the focus first is to deep dive into each entity, which could be a feature, it could be a flow, it could be a requirement, and so on. What do? We try to understand the intended criteria, like the acceptance criteria, for example. Hypothesize what are the potential issues. Understand the various conditions that govern the behavior, and then go along to design scenarios, create suites, and then evaluate each of the entities. Once we're done with this, we get results, and that's the phase 3 where we analyze the outcomes. And what do we analyze? We analyze test coverage for sufficiency, we analyze progress, and finally we analyze the quality of the entity under test. So how does a session look like in IST? A session really is a focused 60 to 90 minute time period of evaluation. Now, what could they look like? Now, in the case of a new system, the session may just be a reconnaissance session to understand the big picture and establish connects. So maybe the entire session is only reconnaissance. Once the big picture is understood, it may only then be to explore and scan for issues. So some sessions could only be that of exploration. In the case of enhancements and fixes, it may be a mix of reconnaissance to understand the impacts and then explore. So a session could be a mix of reconnaissance and exploration. In the case of a review or publishing of report, it may only be recoup, the focus of analysis, and therefore the session may only involve the recoup phase. Lastly, in the case of a small part to be evaluated, maybe just a feature, it may be all the three phases of doing a quick reconnaissance, performing an exploration, and analyzing the outcome. So a session is really a short 60-minute to 90-minute time duration involving a mix of reconnaissance, exploration, and recoup. Depends on the situation. Now, even though it's a short session, it's important that you plan before you commence a session. So what does a plan look like? Well, in the case of a new system where reconnaissance is the only phase, there's nothing to plan. In the case of a large system, we just may need to plan multiple reconnaissance sessions to understand. Once the big picture is understood, where the focus is exploration, the plan is really about what are the entities that need to be tested in this session. And for these entities, what needs to be validated? On what environments do they need to be validated? In the case of enhancements and fixes, the plan is about what entities have been added new and need to be tested, what entities have been enhanced or fixed and need to be tested or retested, and then what entities may be affected by these fixes and need to be retested and for what. And lastly, in the case of fixes only, the plan is really about what are the entities that have been fixed and need to be tested, what are the entities that may be affected by these fixes and need to be retested, and again, retested for what. So, what's an entity? Well, an entity is really a part of a system, and this could be a structural component, a building block like a function, object, UI, maybe a part of a UI element. So it's really a small building block, a bunch of building blocks. That is the lowest level granularity, and that's a structural component. Or it could be a technical feature where we see a very basic behavior made up by integrating various structural components. Or it could be an end user requirement, a meaningful user action that can be done by an user, which is really created by stringing together various technical features. And finally, at the highest level, a business flow, an end-to-end flow, which is created by stringing together multiple user requirements. So an entity can be any one of those, the smallest being a building block or a structural component, and the largest being an end-to-end flow, which is really a business flow. What is the test approach in IST? When we look at a system under test, be it just one of those entities or a collection of those entities, which may be a part of a system or a whole system, whatever be the system under test, there are three ways that we look at how we test. One, from the notion of behavior, looking at it from the front and understanding what are the various conditions that govern the behavior and then using that to test. Secondly, looking at it from backwards, from what was the intended objective and using the criteria to come up and test. And thirdly, to have a better understanding of the system so that we can hypothesize what may be the faults in the system, potential faults, and therefore drive it from potential issues that we want to uncover. And nonetheless, in addition to all this, we also use our experience that we gain from our personal experience and the experience gains from our colleagues and the company. So, what is the practice of IST? It's an interesting combination of yin and yang. For example, it's about planning well, but digressing contextually. It is about focusing sharply, but seeing expansively. It is about thinking logically, but doing creatively. It is about observing diligently and exploring randomly. Jotting down tersely, but picturizing the details. And finally, analyzing carefully, but doing rapidly. So in closing, immersive session testing is a style of testing that exploits the logical left with creative right, enabling one to immerse deeply and test rapidly in short sessions.